I'm Telford Work. We're going to talk about the point of being good. And I want to begin by giving you a story that's very hard to understand morally, very complicated and messy. It comes from Genesis chapter 34. Now Dinah, the daughter of Leah, whom she had borne to Jacob, went out to see the women of the land. And when Shechem, the son of Hamor the Hivite, the prince of the land, saw her, he seized her and lay with her and humbled her. And his soul was drawn to Dinah, the daughter of Jacob. He loved the young woman and spoke tenderly to her. So Shechem spoke to his father Hamor, saying, "Get me this girl for my wife." Now Jacob heard that he had defiled his daughter Dinah, but his sons were with his livestock in the field, so Jacob held his peace until they came. And Hamor the father of Shechem went out to Jacob to speak to him. The sons of Jacob had come in from the field as soon as they had heard of it, and the men were indignant and very angry, because he had done an outrageous thing in Israel by lying with Jacob's daughter, for such a thing must not be done. But Hamor spoke with them, saying, "The soul of my son Shechem longs for your daughter. Please give her to him to be his wife. Make marriages with us. Give your daughters to us, and take our daughters for yourselves. You shall dwell with us, and the land shall be open to you. Dwell and trade in it, and get property in it." Shechem also said to her father and to her brothers, "Let me find favor in your eyes, and whatever you say to me, I will give. Ask me for as great a bride price and gift as you will, and I will give whatever you say to me. Only give me the young woman to be my wife." The sons of Jacob answered Shechem and his father Hamor deceitfully, because he had defiled their sister Dinah. They said to them, "We cannot do this thing, to give our sister to one who is uncircumcised, for that would be a disgrace to us. Only on this condition will we agree with you, that you will become as we are, by every male among you being circumcised. Then we will give our daughters to you, and we will take your daughters to ourselves, and we will dwell with you and become one people. But if you will not listen to us and be circumcised, then we will take our daughter and we will be gone." Their words pleased Hamor and Hamor's son Shechem, and the young man did not delay to do the thing, because he delighted in Jacob's daughter. Now he was the most honored of all his father's house. So Hamor and his son Shechem came to the gate of their city and spoke to the men of their city, saying, "These men are at peace with us. Let them dwell in the land and trade in it, for behold, the land is large enough for them. Let us take their daughters as wives, and let us give them our daughters. Only on this condition will the men agree to dwell with us to become one people, when every male among us is circumcised, as they are circumcised. Will not their livestock, their property, and all their beasts be ours? Only let us agree with them, and they will dwell with us." And all who went out of the gate of his city listened to Hamor and his son Shechem, and every male was circumcised, all who went out of the gate of his city. On the third day, when they were sore, when they were still recovering, two of the sons of Jacob, Simeon and Levi, Dinah's brothers, took their swords and came against the city while it felt secure, and killed all the males. They killed Hamor and his son Shechem with the sword, and took Dinah out of Shechem's house and went away. The sons of Jacob came upon the slain and plundered the city, because they had defiled their sister. They took their flocks and their herds, their donkeys, and whatever was in the city and in the field, all their wealth, all their little ones and their wives, all that was in the houses they captured and plundered. Then Jacob said to Simeon and Levi, "You have brought trouble on me by making me stink to the inhabitants of the land, the Canaanites and the Perizzites. My numbers are few, and if they gather themselves against me and attack me, I shall be destroyed, both I and my household." But they said, "Should he treat our sister like a prostitute?" The story ends there, without editorializing. What drove everyone to act the way they did in that story? Now let's go closer to home, right into your own heart. I'd like you to pause and write down something that needs to change, something in you, then something in your social neighborhood, then something in the wider world. And hold on to these things that need to change. We'll come back to them later. In the meantime, I'm going to pose some questions for you to consider, but not answer right away. Why does it need to change? Why is your desire better than the status quo, than the way things are? And how sure of that are you? How sure are you that the thing needs to change the way you desire it to change? If you discussed what you wrote down with one another, I'm sure moral disagreements would arise. And if you discussed Genesis 34 with each other and interpreted it together, I'm sure moral disagreements would arise. There's no shortage of moral philosophies and ethics out there. In fact, it's easy to get lost in all the schools of thought. So let's simplify things by looking at their common features. A helpful framework for doing this comes from the philosopher Peter Kraft in a book of his called Back to Virtue. Here's a picture of Mount Fuji in Japan, taken out of the window of an airliner by a passenger. We're not in the plane, we're down there in the fog. Kraft analyzes the human condition through the common structures that our moral philosophies have. They all grapple with symptoms, an undesired feature of life. And they arrive at a diagnosis, what they think is the cause of those symptoms. Philosophies, including moral philosophies, dream of a way things ought to be, what he calls a prognosis. And then they work out a way to arrive at that desired effect. Kraft says every moral philosophy describes symptoms, diagnoses an underlying problem, offers a solution or prognosis, and then gives a means to the solution, a prescription. That's not philosophical language, is it? It's medical language. But medicine is trying to solve physiological problems the same way philosophy is trying to solve moral problems. Let me quickly tie in an influential concept, worldview. Leo Apostel describes what he calls the process of worldview formation as a 7-step problem-solving process. Here are his steps. Description. What is the world's nature? Explanation. Why is it the way it is? Evaluation. Why do we feel this way about it? Futurology. How should we act? Construction. What's possible for us, given the reality? Integration. How can we answer the first 3 questions coherently so that those answers hang together? And finally, worldviews are incomplete. They're always under construction. So the final question is, what kind of partial answers can we offer to questions that we can't fully answer? Well, I just want to point out that Kraft's 4 great truths are right here in these 7 questions. The question, what is the world's nature? Well, that goes to symptoms. Why it is the way it is, that goes to a diagnosis, a metaphysics. How should we act is a prescription that'll help us arrive at what's possible and desirable, the prognosis. So the structure itself of the philosophical process embodies these 4 great truths. I originally wondered why he calls them truths when they're questions. For Kraft, they're all truths because all the great moral philosophies are addressing the same nearly universal convictions. Something's not right for some set of reasons. There is a fog that we're stuck in. We are after better and looking for ways to get there. There is a way out of the fog, or there has to be. Those are the 4 great truths. Our explanations of those truths can be adequate or inadequate, but the common structure of our questions suggests a deeper metaphysical reality that we're all, to some extent, consciously aware of. By the way, ethics tries to see above the fog and map the mountain so that people can ascend it, whereas revelation just posts a snapshot from the airplane above. As I'm sure you know, our sense of what's wrong and how to fix it diverges wildly. Here's a short list of authorities, major thinkers in philosophy, religion, politics, etc. through history, and their answers to the 4 great truths. For Siddhartha, the founder of Buddhism, the symptoms of our problem are human suffering. The diagnosis of the problem is human desire. If we quell our desires, we can escape our suffering. The prognosis, the goal to reach the top of Mount Fuji, is nirvana, the kind of cessation of being. And so the prescription, the way to get there, is ego reduction. Reduce the power of my own ego and desires in my life. For Confucius, the symptoms are disorder, personal disorder, and social disorder, and the egotism that brings it. And Confucius's diagnosis was, we don't know enough. We don't understand how things ought to be. So ignorance is our diagnosis. If disorder is a symptom, then the prognosis is harmony, order. And if ignorance is our problem, then the prescription will be self-improvement, education, character formation. And this is the heart of Confucianism, one of the great moral philosophies of the world. If you're not from the West and you aren't very familiar with these things, you might never have noticed how different Siddhartha and Confucius are about what's wrong and how to fix it. In ancient Greece, the school of the Stoics actually sounds a lot like Siddhartha. The problem is anxiety, worry. The diagnosis is human passions, disordered human passions. The goal or the prognosis is peace, and passionlessness, apatheia in Greek, is the way to get there. Going down this list would be tedious, but take a look at some of the figures who have weighed in on the four great truths. Some of these are Kreft's own descriptions, some of them come from me. You have Plato, Jesus, Augustine, Muhammad, Luther, Descartes, Pascal, Kierkegaard, Nietzsche, Marx, Freud. I'm listing figures that are intellectually important to the modern West, but any civilization could arrive at a similar list. Some of those figures would have left an impact on the whole world, whereas other figures might only have had a local, ethnic impact. Nevertheless, we're asking the same kinds of questions. A word for the top of Mount Fuji is the good. Philosophy seeks the good life. In fact, we all, whether we know it or not, seek the good life. We all want to find our way up what we think is Mount Fuji. Kreft's scheme portrays goodness as a goal, a telos, or an end, or goodness as a means to that end. So that leaves us with an open question. Is goodness the goal, or is goodness the way to get there, or is goodness involved in both? In this talk, I'll cluster moral visions according to common ways of treating goodness as a means, or as an end, or as both. This is a form of what's called meta-ethics. Meta-ethics, and I hope this schema, helps us learn about these disputed matters and understand them without getting caught up or lost in the conflict. And that tour of ethical proposals of moral philosophies is what we'll be working on for a while.